AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after she got kicked out of her boyfriend's apartment. I, 28M, have a sister, Chloe, 24F, who I've always had a somewhat complicated relationship with. Growing up, we didn't exactly get along. She was the typical spoiled brat in the family, always getting away with things because she's the youngest and had a way of manipulating our parents. She's smart, but she's never had much interest in anything other than living a carefree life and getting by with as little effort as possible. Our parents, despite their best intentions, always coddled her, and that dynamic has only gotten more intense as we've gotten older. I moved out of the house at 22 and have been living independently ever since. Chloe, on the other hand, never really left home in any meaningful sense. She went to college for a bit, but she dropped out after a year and just kind of bounced between different friends' places and her on and off boyfriends. She has always had a knack for finding guys who would let her live with them, and it's worked out for her so far. She's not necessarily a bad person, but she's always looking for someone to support her without her having to contribute much in return. A couple of weeks ago, Chloe reached out to me saying that she had just been kicked out by her latest boyfriend, Mark, after a pretty bad argument. For what she told me, it seems that she was staying at his place for a few months, and things went downhill fast. Apparently, Mark had gotten frustrated with her lack of responsibility. She wasn't helping with bills, cooking, or doing anything around the house. They had a fight about her spending too much money on clothes, and Mark told her to pack her things and leave. Chloe had nowhere to go. She didn't want to go back to our parents' house because she said that would be embarrassing. So she turned to me. She asked if she could crash at my place for a while until she figured things out. Now, here's where I might sound like the bad guy, but let me explain why I said no. I don't have a problem helping people out, but Chloe has a history of taking advantage of me. When I was younger, I used to let her stay with me for short periods of time when she didn't have anywhere else to go. Every single time, she would either damage my things, leave my place a mess, or refuse to pay for anything, even when we agreed that she would chip in. I once let her stay at my apartment for 3 months while she was between jobs, and by the time she left, I had to replace several things that she had broken, and I was hundreds of dollars out of pocket for groceries and utilities. It was one of the most stressful periods of my life, and I told myself that I would never let her stay with me again. When she asked if she could stay with me, I was honest. I told her that I couldn't do it. I told her I wasn't comfortable letting her move in, not after the things that happened the last time she stayed with me. I told her that she needed to figure something out on her own, maybe find a short-term rental or stay with a friend, but I couldn't open my door to her again. She didn't take it well. Chloe got really upset and started calling me all kinds of names: selfish, uncaring, unsupportive, and so on. She accused me of being just like everyone else in the family who always abandons her when she needs help the most. She told me that if I really cared about her, I'd help her out, and that I was being cruel by turning her away. It was an emotional conversation, and I started to feel bad, but I stuck to my decision. I explained that I wanted to help her in other ways, like supporting her emotionally or helping her look for a new place, but I couldn't let her stay at my apartment. A few days later, I got a call from our mom. Apparently, Chloe had gone to her and told her everything, and my mom was furious with me for turning Chloe away. She said I was being too harsh, and that family should always stick together, no matter what. She suggested I rethink my decision and let Chloe stay with me, even if just for a short time, to give her some space to figure things out. My mom told me that Chloe was really struggling and that I needed to be the bigger person and help her. I felt torn, but I still said no. My mom didn't take it well, and we ended up getting into an argument. She called me heartless and said I was acting like a stranger to my own sister. After that, I was getting texts from Chloe and even my dad, all telling me I was wrong for not helping her. Chloe even threatened to stop speaking to me altogether if I didn't change my mind. It's been over a week now, and Chloe has still not spoken to me. Our parents are upset, and I feel like the whole family is disappointed in me. Some of my friends have sided with me, but others have said I should have just let her stay temporarily. Now, I'm wondering if I made the right call. I don't want to be the bad guy, but I also don't want to get stuck in another situation where I'm giving and giving without any real effort from her side. AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me again. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and motivates me to create even more amazing content just for you. Make sure to turn on notifications so you'll never miss out on a new video. I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support. It truly helps the channel grow. AITA for refusing to pay my sister's medical bills after she lied to me about a financial emergency. I, 29M, have a younger sister, Olivia, 26F, who has always been a bit, well, dramatic. We grew up in a household where things were tight financially, and we learned early on that you don't ask for help unless it's absolutely necessary. My parents did their best, but they were constantly juggling bills, so we both had to step up in terms of responsibility, even as kids. For the most part, Olivia and I have been able to handle things on our own as we grew up. About a month ago, Olivia called me in a panic. She said she had a serious health issue and needed me to help pay for her hospital bills. She didn't give many details on the phone, but claimed it was an emergency. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not the best when it comes to dealing with family drama. I've always been the go-to guy when things get tough, but I don't want to be taken advantage of either. Still, it sounded like she really needed help, so I told her I'd look into it and try to help. I don't have a ton of money, but I've been doing okay. I've been saving up for a house and trying to pay down some of my student loans, but I figured I could make it work if it was something truly urgent. The next day, I drove to the hospital where Olivia said she was being treated. When I got there, I asked the nurse for information about her condition, and they were very vague. So I went directly to Olivia's room and found her sitting in a hospital gown, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look sick. In fact, she looked perfectly fine. When I asked her what was going on, she started to tell me about this life-threatening condition she had, but it didn't add up. The details were inconsistent, and she kept changing the story. First, she said it was something related to her heart. Then it was a serious infection. Then it was a complication from a minor surgery she had a few months ago. The more she talked, the more I felt like I was being fed a line of BS. I told her I needed more information so I could understand the situation better. She insisted that she couldn't talk about the specifics and that it was too complicated for me to understand. I asked her to give me a bill or some paperwork so I could see what was actually going on, but she got defensive and said she didn't want to deal with paperwork right now. Something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played, but I didn't want to accuse her of lying without proof. Still, I left the hospital that day with more questions than answers. I didn't immediately offer to help with the bills, but I told her I'd check in the next day. That night, I started doing some digging. I called the hospital to verify Olivia's admission and requested some details about her treatment, since I was listed as a close family member. They told me they couldn't give me any specifics, but confirmed she was in their system. However, they said that her treatment didn't seem serious enough to warrant the kind of urgency she had described. I also reached out to a couple of friends who are nurses, and they gave me some insight into the types of conditions that would require hospitalization. Based on what Olivia had told me, it didn't seem like she was in any real danger. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like she was exaggerating or even fabricating the whole thing. I decided to visit her again, but this time I was prepared to ask direct questions. When I arrived at her room, I found her lounging on the bed, watching Netflix. There was no sign of N4, no machines hooked up to her, nothing that would indicate she was seriously ill. I confronted her and asked her point blank if she was lying about her condition. She initially tried to avoid answering, but when I pressed her, she admitted that she had been lying. She told me that while she had been feeling a bit under the weather a few weeks ago, she wasn't actually in the hospital for anything serious. She claimed that she had been using the emergency as a way to get me to pay for some of her personal debts. Apparently, she had accumulated a fair amount of credit card debt and didn't want to tell me the truth because she was too embarrassed. She said she knew I'd be willing to help if I thought she was in a life or death situation, so she fabricated the whole story. I was furious. Not only had she lied to me, but she had tried to manipulate my emotions and guilt me into giving her money. I felt completely betrayed. When I asked her why she didn't just be honest with me, she said she didn't think I would help if it wasn't a life or death situation. In her mind, it was better to lie than to tell the truth, even if that meant jeopardizing our relationship. I told her I wasn't going to pay her bills, especially after everything she had put me through. She begged me to help her, saying that she would get into even more financial trouble if I didn't step in. But I was resolute. I told her I couldn't trust her anymore and that I wasn't going to reward her dishonesty. After I left, I found out that she had started telling our parents a different version of the story, painting me as the villain for refusing to help her. Our parents called me, trying to guilt-trip me into paying her bills, but I stood my ground. I said that I couldn't keep enabling her behavior, especially after everything that had happened. Now, a few weeks later, things have only gotten worse. Olivia is still upset with me and hasn't spoken to me since our last conversation. She's telling anyone who will listen that I'm a bad brother for not helping her in her time of need. My parents are still disappointed in me, and I'm starting to feel like I'm the one in the wrong here. I know I could have handled things differently. Maybe I could have confronted her earlier or try to have a more compassionate conversation about her financial struggles. But I just feel like I can't keep supporting someone who lies and manipulates me when they're in a tough spot. AITA for refusing to pay my sister's medical bills after she lied to me about a financial emergency. AITA for not inviting my sister to my birthday after she told me I should get over it when I was grieving the loss of my pet. I'm having a hard time dealing with this situation, and I don't know if I'm being unreasonable or if my feelings are completely justified. So, here it goes. About a month ago, I lost my dog, Max. He was a rescue and had been with me for 10 years. He wasn't just a pet. He was like family. He had been with me through all the highs and lows of my life. Max was my emotional support during tough times, a constant companion on walks, and he always knew how to cheer me up when I was feeling down. Losing him hit me harder than I ever expected, and I struggled for a while with the grief. I know some people don't understand the depth of the bond between people and their pets, but Max wasn't just a dog to me. He was a huge part of my daily routine, and the house felt so empty without him. I was sad, and I felt like I lost a part of myself. At the time, I wasn't feeling like celebrating anything. I told my family that I didn't want a big birthday celebration. My birthday was coming up, and I usually love throwing a party or having a small get-together. But this year, I wasn't in the mood for it. I told my sister, who is always the life of the party and loves throwing these big events, that I didn't want anything special and that I just wanted a quiet day to grieve and reflect. I thought she would understand. Unfortunately, I was wrong. A week before my birthday, my sister sent me a text saying she had already planned a birthday dinner at a nice restaurant for me and that she would handle everything. I told her again that I wasn't ready for a celebration and that I really just wanted to spend the day at home, maybe watch a movie, and keep things low-key. I thought she would take the hint, but instead, she replied with something along the lines of, "You need to snap out of it. It's just a dog and it's been weeks. You can't sit in your sadness forever. You're ruining your own birthday." I was taken aback. I didn't expect her to be so dismissive of my grief. But I calmly explained that losing Max was harder for me than she could understand and that I just wasn't ready for a big celebration. I told her I needed time and space to heal and that I didn't want anyone making a big deal out of my birthday this year. She wasn't having any of it. She responded with, "You're being dramatic. Everyone else is over it. Get over it. I'm planning a dinner for you, and you're going to come, or we're not talking for a while." I was shocked. My sister had always been supportive in the past, but this felt like a total betrayal. I felt like she was treating my grief like it was some kind of inconvenience for her, instead of showing the understanding and compassion I needed at the time. I told her that I didn't want to have anything to do with the dinner, and that if she couldn't respect my wishes, I would prefer to not celebrate at all. I also told her that if she continued to be so dismissive of my feelings, I might need some space from her. She didn't take it well. She blew up at me, saying I was being selfish, childish, and ungrateful. She told me that I was ruining the family dynamic and making everyone uncomfortable. She said, "I'm doing all this for you, and you can't even appreciate it? If you can't handle one dinner, then maybe you need to grow up." I was hurt and frustrated. I tried to explain that I wasn't refusing the dinner because I didn't appreciate her effort, but because I was genuinely struggling with my emotions. It wasn't about the dinner, it was about the fact that I didn't feel like celebrating while I was still grieving. But she wouldn't listen. As the day of my birthday approached, I felt more and more anxious about the whole situation. I didn't want to fight with my sister, but at the same time, I felt like I was being cornered into doing something I wasn't ready for. I kept telling myself that she just didn't understand, but her words kept replaying in my head. I didn't want to spend my birthday in a restaurant pretending like everything was fine when I was still struggling with the loss of my dog. Eventually, I made the decision not to go to the dinner. I texted her the night before and said, "I'm really sorry, but I'm not ready to celebrate. I'm going to spend the day quietly and reflect on my dog's life. I hope you understand." She didn't take it well. She called me, yelling at me about how selfish I was being and how I was making her look bad in front of the family. She said I was being dramatic and that I was being disrespectful by refusing to celebrate my birthday with her. She ended the call with, "Fine, don't come, but don't expect me to do anything for you ever again." Since then, I've been getting messages from other family members telling me that I'm in the wrong and that I should have just sucked it up for one night. They all think I'm being too sensitive and that my sister was just trying to help me feel better. Some of them even told me that I'm making it worse by holding on to my grief for so long. I don't know if I overreacted or if I was justified in my feelings. I understand that my sister was trying to do something nice for me, but at the same time, I don't think it's okay for her to dismiss my grief like that. It wasn't just about my birthday, it was about my emotional well-being. I didn't want to celebrate because I wasn't ready, and I felt like I needed time to process the loss of Max. So, AITA for not inviting my sister to my birthday dinner? Or should I have just sucked it up and gone, even though I wasn't ready? AITA for refusing to give my brother back the money he lent me for my startup? I, 28F, have always dreamed of starting my own business. I've worked hard over the years, saved up a decent amount of money, and I finally felt like I was in a place where I could take the leap and pursue it. The problem is, starting a business isn't cheap, and I didn't have quite enough of my own savings to cover everything I needed, especially since I didn't want to go into debt. This is where my brother, 32M, let's call him Alex, came in. He's been working in finance for several years and makes a comfortable living. We've always had a good relationship, though I wouldn't say we're extremely close. He's the kind of person who's always willing to help, but never goes out of his way unless it benefits him in some way. I never thought that would affect our relationship, but it started to seem like I was wrong. When I came to Alex for help, I explained that I was looking to take out a loan from the bank, but the bank required me to show a personal investment in the business before they'd approve the loan. It wasn't a huge amount, just enough to cover the startup costs I didn't have. I asked Alex if he'd be willing to lend me $10,000 to cover the shortfall, and I promised to pay him back as soon as I was up and running. He agreed without hesitation, and I was incredibly grateful. At the time, I thought it was a one-time thing, a small loan from family to help me get started. However, as I got further into the business and things started to take off, Alex began bringing up the loan constantly. It started with small reminders like, "How's the business going? Are you close to paying me back yet?" Or, "Let me know when I'll get the money back. I got some stuff I want to invest in." I'm not going to lie, it felt a little awkward. I had always been a proud person, and asking for help wasn't easy for me. But the business was doing better than I expected, and I was on track to pay him back in full, so I didn't think much of it at first. Then, a few months ago, Alex asked if he could take a look at the books of my business. He said he wanted to make sure I was using the loan properly and to see if my projections were accurate. At first, I thought he was just being cautious, and I didn't mind letting him see the finances. But when I sent him a detailed report, he came back with a lot of comments and suggestions that I didn't ask for. It quickly became clear that he wasn't just concerned about the loan. He was trying to gain some control over my business. His suggestions range from downsizing certain aspects of the business to restructuring my pricing model, most of which I had already carefully considered and decided against. He even started asking about my future plans, implying that I should shift my focus toward areas he thought would be more profitable. I felt like he was trying to take over in a way that was beyond what I had ever agreed to. I told him that I appreciated his input, but that I was confident in the direction I was taking and prefer to manage the business on my own. That's when he started getting a little more aggressive. He began sending me daily texts, asking for updates, and pressuring me to pay him back sooner. I tried to stay patient and explained that while I was doing well, I still needed a little more time to ensure the business was stable enough to pay him back in full. This past weekend, things took a turn. I had finally started making enough money to pay him back, and I was planning to do so by the end of this month. However, Alex came over for a family gathering, and in front of our parents, he asked me directly when I would be paying him back. He made it sound like I'd been dodging him or avoiding the subject, which wasn't true at all. I felt humiliated because it felt like he was putting me on the spot and making me seem like I was taking advantage of him. I explained that I was on track to pay him back within a few weeks, but he didn't let it go. He said, "It's not about the money, it's about respect. I've been helping you out, and you've been avoiding me like I'm some kind of burden. If you care about family, you'll pay me back right now." It felt like an ultimatum, and I was really hurt. In front of everyone, I told him that I didn't appreciate his tone and that I didn't think it was fair to make me feel pressured like this, especially when I had every intention of paying him back. I also pointed out that if he was so concerned about the loan, he should have been more specific about the terms from the beginning instead of acting like it was just a casual favor. That's when things really escalated. Alex got defensive and started accusing me of being ungrateful. He said that I had no right to act like I was doing him a favor when he was the one who took a risk by lending me the money. He even called me selfish for not prioritizing paying him back faster, which felt like a low blow, especially since I had always tried to maintain a good relationship with him. At this point, our parents got involved, and things got even messy. My mom sided with Alex, saying I should pay him back immediately because he was helping me out of the goodness of his heart, and I shouldn't make him wait any longer. My dad, who is generally more neutral, tried to calm things down, but Alex kept pushing. He ended up storming out of the house, saying that if I couldn't pay him back right away, he didn't want to have any part of my business. I was left feeling completely torn. On one hand, I know I'm on track to pay him back, and I've always tried to be respectful of his help. But on the other hand, I can't shake the feeling that Alex is using this loan as a way to manipulate me and control my business. He's making me feel like I owe him more than just money, like I owe him some kind of loyalty or submission to his judgment, and that's not something I'm willing to give. So now I'm wondering, AITA for refusing to give him the money back right away and standing my ground about how I want to run my business? I feel like I'm being reasonable, but my family seems to think I'm being disrespectful and ungrateful. I can't help but feel like I'm being pressured into something that doesn't sit right with me. AITA for telling my friend I won't support her decision to drop out of school. I, 25F, have been friends with Lily, 24F, since high school. We've always been close, and we share a lot of the same values and interests, so I consider her one of my best friends. Over the years, we've supported each other through thick and thin. However, we've reached a point where our values are starting to clash, and I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong here. Lily has always been the type to follow her heart more than her head. She's extremely creative and wants to be a photographer. We both started college at the same time, but our paths diverged after the first year. I stuck with my degree in business, which is a practical choice, and while I'm not in love with it, I'm doing well in it and I have a clear plan for my future. Lily, on the other hand, decided to pursue a degree in art with the intention of becoming a professional photographer. While I respect her passion for photography, I've always been a little worried about her decision. Art is a tough industry to break into, and I know it's not the most stable career. Lily's parents have always been supportive of her, but they've also expressed concerns about her future. I know they were hoping she would take a more practical route, but they've never pushed her too hard. A few weeks ago, Lily came to me and told me that she was considering dropping out of college. She said that she was fed up with the pressure to finish her degree and that she wanted to focus full-time on her photography career. She said that the degree wasn't helping her improve as an artist and that she felt like she was wasting time and money. She even showed me her portfolio, which was impressive, but I still didn't think it was enough to make such a drastic decision. At first, I didn't want to discourage her. I've always been the kind of friend who supports others' dreams, no matter how impractical they may seem. But the more I thought about it, the more I began to worry. Dropping out of college is a huge decision, and the photography industry isn't a stable one. Lily doesn't have a backup plan, and she hasn't really done much to build a business around her art. She doesn't have the connections or the resources to make it work full-time, at least not yet. I could tell she was excited about the idea, but I felt like she was jumping into something without considering the long-term consequences. I decided to have a serious conversation with her about it. I told her that I understood her desire to pursue her passion, but that I was concerned she was making a rash decision. I reminded her that a degree, even in something like art, could still open doors for her and help her build a career in the future. I also brought up the fact that most successful photographers have to hustle for years before they really make it, and that it wasn't as simple as quitting school and instantly becoming a professional. I wasn't trying to tell her she shouldn't go after her dreams. I was just trying to get her to slow down and think it through carefully. Lily was not happy with my response. She got upset and said I didn't understand her passion. She told me that I was being realistic to a fault, and that I was treating her like she was making a mistake without considering how miserable she was in school. She said she had already been trying to make it as a photographer on the side, and that her portfolio was growing and she was starting to get paid gigs. She felt like she could take the leap now, and that waiting another 2 years to finish her degree would only delay her success. I told her that I didn't want to see her give up her education, especially if it was something she could use later down the line, and that I was worried about her long-term stability. She responded by saying, "You don't get it. You're just doing what everyone expects you to do. You've always played it safe, and I don't want to live like that. I need to take control of my life and make my own choices." I knew she was hurt by my words, but I felt like I had to speak up. I didn't want her to regret her decision, and I didn't want to be a passive bystander in her life when I genuinely thought she was making a mistake. But now, I'm starting to wonder if I overstepped. It's not my place to tell her what to do with her life, and I do want to be supportive of her dreams. But I also know that sometimes friends need to hear the hard truths, even if they don't want to hear them. A couple of days ago, Lily told me that she had made up her mind to drop out of school and focus on her photography career full-time. She said that she wasn't asking for my approval and that she didn't need my support if I was going to keep questioning her decisions. That really stung, and I tried to explain that I just wanted what was best for her, but she said that I couldn't understand her vision because I was too caught up in practicality. Since then, things have been tense between us. We've barely spoken, and I feel like she's distancing herself from me. She's still determined to drop out, and I feel like she's making a huge mistake, but I don't know if I should push her further. At the same time, I don't want to be the kind of friend who just goes along with everything without speaking up when I think something isn't right. So, AITA for telling my friend that I won't support her decision to drop out of school, even though it's what she really wants to do. I feel like I'm just looking out for her, but I'm afraid I might have overstepped and ruined our friendship. Should I have just kept quiet and let her make her own decision, or did I have the right to try and talk her out of it? AITA for refusing to let my brother move in with me after he refused to acknowledge my boundaries. So I, 28F, am in a bit of a situation with my brother, 30M, and I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong here. Let me give you some context to explain the situation. Growing up, my brother and I were pretty close, or at least I thought we were. We always had each other's backs, especially after our parents separated when I was 12 and he was 14. The emotional stress was tough on both of us, but we always managed to get through it together. That being said, we didn't have the easiest relationship when it came to adulthood. My brother has always been a bit irresponsible when it comes to money and living situations, and I've always been the more stable one. I have a full-time job, I've lived in the same place for over 5 years, and I keep my life pretty organized. Anyway, the main issue here started a few months ago. My brother had been living with a friend for a while, but the living situation became strained, and he was forced to move out. He called me up one day, asking if he could stay with me temporarily until he got back on his feet. At first, I was hesitant but agreed, mainly because I knew he was in a tough spot and I didn't want him to be homeless. I told him it would be for a few weeks max, and we agreed that he'd find a more permanent place by then. Fast forward 2 months, and my brother was still living with me. I kept asking when he was going to find a new place, and he kept saying he was working on it or looking for the right spot. However, it was becoming obvious that he wasn't really trying that hard. His job situation was also a bit of a mess. He had a part-time gig, but he'd been complaining about not making enough money to cover rent on his own. I told him he needed to get a full-time job and take more responsibility, but he wasn't very receptive to my advice. The main issue, however, wasn't just his lack of urgency about moving out. It was the constant disregard for my boundaries. I've always been pretty clear about my need for personal space. I live in a small apartment, and I like things organized and quiet. My brother, on the other hand, has a different way of living. He's often messy, loud, and has friends over late at night, sometimes causing disruption. He also doesn't clean up after himself, and I found myself constantly picking up after him. It was exhausting, and honestly, I felt like I was starting to lose my sense of peace in my own home. I sat down with him several times to have conversations about these issues. I told him I needed him to respect my space, clean up after himself, and follow some basic rules while living here. But every time, he'd agree in the moment, and then nothing would change. I started feeling really frustrated and like my boundaries weren't being respected. I've never been one to get super confrontational, but eventually I hit a breaking point. I told him that I couldn't keep living like this, and that he needed to either follow the rules or start making concrete plans to move out. That's when things took a turn. He got defensive and started accusing me of being a bad sister. He told me that I was being too controlling and that I should be more understanding of his situation. He said I was lucky to have a stable life, and that he didn't need to be lectured all the time. He started guilt-tripping me, claiming that I was being unfair to him and that he had no other options for living arrangements. He even went as far as saying, "I can't believe you're kicking me out when I have nowhere else to go." I thought family was supposed to help each other out. I was taken aback by this because I had never told him to leave. I just asked for him to be respectful of the rules we had discussed. But instead of hearing me out, he completely dismissed my feelings and started pushing his own agenda. It became clear to me that he wasn't willing to change or make any effort to follow my boundaries. After this conversation, I knew I couldn't continue living with him under these circumstances. I needed my space back, and I needed to feel comfortable in my own home again. So, I told him I couldn't keep letting him stay with me indefinitely and that he needed to find a place by the end of the month. I also told him that if he didn't make any progress by that time, I wouldn't be able to help him further. I thought this was a reasonable request, given how much time he had already spent living with me. He didn't take it well. He started calling me selfish and said that I was abandoning him when he needed me the most. He also brought up past family issues, including how our parents had been absent during certain parts of our childhood, trying to guilt me into feeling bad for him. He accused me of thinking I was better than him just because I had my life together. He said that he didn't have a support system like I did, and that I should be doing more to help him. Since then, we've barely spoken. He's still living with me, but we're not on good terms. I've tried to give him some space, but he's constantly passive-aggressive about the situation, and I feel uncomfortable in my own home. Our other family members have reached out, and they've told me that I'm being too hard on him and that I should give him more time. They say I should be more patient because of everything he's been through. Some have even suggested that I just let him stay longer because he's family. But my friends and even my therapist have told me I'm in the right to set boundaries and that I've done enough to help him. I just don't know if I'm being too harsh. I get that he's struggling, but I feel like he's taking advantage of my kindness. I've already given him 2 months of free housing, and I don't think it's too much to ask for him to be respectful of my space and start taking more responsibility for his life. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother continue living with me after he ignored my boundaries and made no effort to improve his situation? Should I have given him more time, or was I right to enforce my limits? AITA for refusing to let my cousin live with me after she promised to help with rent, but didn't? I, 32M, have always had a pretty good relationship with my extended family. My cousin, Emma, 30F, and I grew up together, and while we're not super close, we've always gotten along. Over the past few years, she's had some ups and downs in her life, particularly with her job and living situation. A few months ago, Emma called me and said that she was going through a rough patch and needed a place to stay for a while until she could get back on her feet. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I understood that sometimes life throws curveballs and I wanted to help. I'm not rich by any means, but I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I figure it wouldn't be the worst thing to have her stay with me for a bit. Before she moved in, we had a conversation about the terms of her staying with me. I told her that I wasn't expecting her to pay for everything, but she needed to contribute to rent and utilities in some capacity. I made it clear that I was not in a position to cover all of her living expenses, and I needed her to be responsible for a portion of the bills. Emma agreed, saying that she understood and was happy to pay her fair share. We settled on a reasonable arrangement. She would pay half of the rent and help out with utilities. It seemed like a fair deal, and I was optimistic that it would work out. The first few weeks went fine. Emma moved in, and things were relatively smooth. She did her best to contribute to household chores, and while there were occasional disagreements about the little things, whose turn it was to take out the trash, what food was off limits in the fridge, it wasn't anything major. I still felt like she was trying to get back on track, and I didn't mind lending her a hand. However, about a month in, things started to take a turn. Emma began to fall behind on rent. At first, it was just a couple of days late, and I didn't think much of it. I reminded her that we had agreed on a payment schedule, and she apologized, promising to pay the next day. I let it slide, thinking maybe she had just been busy or caught up in something. But then the late payments became a pattern. By the second month of her living with me, Emma still hadn't paid her full share of rent. She would send me small amounts here and there, $50 one week, $100 the next, but nothing close to the $700 she was supposed to contribute. I had to ask her multiple times for the rest of the money, and each time, she had some excuse. I had an unexpected expense. Work was slow this week. I'm waiting on a paycheck. I started to get frustrated, but didn't want to start a big fight. I still held on to the belief that she was struggling, and I tried to be understanding. Around this time, I also noticed that Emma wasn't really doing anything to help herself get out of her situation. She would sleep in late, spend most of her days on her phone or watching TV, and barely even look for a new job. When I would ask her about her job search or if she had updated her resume, she would say, "I'm just waiting for the right opportunity to come along." It was clear to me that she wasn't putting in the effort she needed to improve her situation, and I was getting annoyed. At this point, I had been covering the entire rent on my own for 2 months. My savings were getting tight, and I was starting to feel the financial strain of having to pay for everything. I still tried to be patient, reminding Emma again that she needed to step up and contribute. She promised she would, but her promises were empty. Every time I asked her about paying her share, she had an excuse ready, and the amount she owed kept piling up. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. It had been over 2 months since she'd paid her fair share of rent, and she owed me more than $1,500. I didn't want to kick her out, but I couldn't afford to keep supporting her indefinitely. I sat her down one evening and told her that if she couldn't pay me back by the end of the month, she would need to find somewhere else to live. I explained that I couldn't continue to cover her expenses and that it wasn't fair to me. Emma didn't take this well. She started crying and said that I was being harsh and unsympathetic. She accused me of not understanding how hard her life had been and how much she was struggling. I tried to explain that I wasn't unsympathetic, but I had my own financial responsibilities, and I couldn't keep carrying her. She kept saying that I was kicking her out when she needed me most, and that I should be there for her. It felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me into letting her stay, but I stood firm. The next day, she came to me with a plan. She would pay me $200 this week, then another $200 the next, and so on, until the debt was cleared. It sounded like progress, so I agreed to give her one more chance. But when the first payment came due, she didn't pay me a cent. Instead, she told me that she had a small emergency and needed the money for something else. I had finally had enough. I told her that I was done. I couldn't keep enabling her and letting her take advantage of my generosity. I told her that she needed to leave, and I would no longer be letting her stay in my apartment. Emma was furious and started yelling at me, calling me selfish and accusing me of abandoning her. She said that no one in the family had ever treated her this way, and that I was the worst cousin she had. I felt bad for her, but I knew that I had done everything I could. I had been patient, I had tried to be understanding, and I had given her multiple chances. She had promised to pay me and had broken those promises every single time. I couldn't keep letting her live in my apartment without pulling her weight, especially when she wasn't making any real efforts to improve her situation. Now, a few weeks later, Emma is still angry with me, and she's been telling everyone in the family that I'm a terrible person. My parents have called me, asking why I couldn't just help her out for a little longer. They say that she's been going through a lot, and I should have been more understanding. My aunt and uncle have also weighed in, saying that I should have been a better support system for her. I'm starting to wonder if I was too harsh, but I feel like I gave her enough chances. I feel like I have the right to expect someone to be responsible when they're staying in my home, especially when it involves money. Am I the asshole for refusing to let Emma stay with me any longer after she failed to follow through on her promises to help with rent? AITA for telling my brother he can't move into my house after he lost his job and got evicted? I, 29M, have a brother, Jason, 27M, who I've always been close with. Growing up, we were more like best friends than siblings, and I've always tried to be there for him when he needed help. The thing is, Jason has always had a tendency to make impulsive decisions and act without thinking things through. He's not a bad person, but he's always been a bit of a mess, and I've often found myself cleaning up after him, both emotionally and financially. About a year ago, Jason lost his job at a tech company where he had been working for almost 4 years. It wasn't a surprise. He was often late, had trouble managing deadlines, and wasn't exactly a model employee, but I still felt bad for him. He had been living on his own in a small apartment in the city, and after losing his job, he started struggling to pay rent. I tried to help him out when I could, sending him some money and offering to help him find a new job. But he kept making excuses and wasn't really proactive about getting back on track. Eventually, after about 6 months of not being able to pay rent, Jason got evicted from his apartment. When he called me to tell me what had happened, he sounded like he was at rock bottom. He said he didn't have anywhere to go and that he had tried staying with a few friends, but none of them had space for him long term. At that point, I felt bad for him. I knew he was struggling, and despite his mistakes, I wanted to help. So, I told him that he could stay with me for a while until he got back on his feet. I live in a decent-sized house in the suburbs with a spare room, and I figure would be the least I could do for my brother. I made it clear, though, that it was only going to be a temporary arrangement and that I wasn't going to carry him indefinitely. I told him that he needed to use the time he had living with me to get back on track, find a new job, start paying off some of his debts, and work on becoming more responsible. At first, things seemed fine. Jason moved in, and we set some ground rules. I asked him to contribute to household expenses, help with cleaning, and generally take more responsibility for himself. He agreed, and we had a few good weeks where it seemed like he was actually trying. He would go on job interviews, look for work, and kept his side of the house relatively tidy. But slowly, things started to slip. He stopped going to interviews, spending more time playing video games and binge-watching TV shows. His room became a mess, and he wasn't helping with the housework like he had promised. Whenever I asked him how the job search was going, he would make excuses. Either he wasn't hearing back from anyone, or he didn't like the jobs he was applying for, or some other excuse. I tried being patient, but after a few months of this, I started getting frustrated. One day, I came home from work and found that Jason had thrown a party at my house without asking. The living room was a disaster. Empty bottles everywhere, food spilled on the carpet, and random people I didn't know were lounging around. I was livid. I made it clear that he needed to respect my space and take responsibility for his life, but this felt like a total disregard for everything I'd asked him to do. I confronted him immediately. Jason apologized, but he didn't seem particularly sorry. He said that he was just blowing off steam and that it wasn't a big deal. I told him that it was a huge deal and that I was done letting him take advantage of my hospitality. I told him that if he wasn't serious about getting his life together, he needed to leave. He was shocked and begged me not to kick him out. He said he didn't have anywhere else to go and that he'd get his act together. But I felt like I was enabling his irresponsibility, and I couldn't keep going like this. I gave him an ultimatum. He had 2 months to get a job and start paying rent, or he would need to find somewhere else to stay. I told him that I loved him, but I couldn't keep letting him live off me without making any real effort to improve his situation. The 2 months passed, and nothing changed. Jason still hadn't found a job, and he hadn't contributed a penny toward rent or bills. He continued to leave his room in a mess, and he was constantly asking me for money for food and other things. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my patience running out. It was clear to me that he wasn't taking the situation seriously. Finally, I told him that it was time for him to leave. I gave him 2 weeks to find a place to stay, and I made it clear that he couldn't stay here any longer. Jason was furious. He called me selfish and said that I was abandoning him when he needed me the most. He told me that I was being unreasonable and that I should just let him stay longer while he figured things out. I told him that I wasn't doing this to be cruel, but that he needed to take responsibility for himself and stop relying on me. The next day, my parents called. They said I was being too harsh and that I should have been more patient with Jason. They said that families should help each other no matter what, and that I shouldn't just kick him out in his time of need. They told me I was being too tough on him and that I should give him more time to get back on his feet. I tried to explain that I'd already given him enough time, but they didn't seem to understand. They even suggested that I was being selfish for putting my own needs ahead of my brother's. Now, Jason is out of my house, but he's not speaking to me. My parents are mad at me, and I feel like I've lost my relationship with my brother. He sent me a few angry texts saying that I'm no better than anyone else who's ever let him down, and that he'll never forgive me for kicking him out when he was at his lowest. I'm starting to second-guess myself. Maybe I was too harsh. I've always tried to help him, but at what point do I stop enabling his behavior and let him figure things out on his own? I don't want to be the bad guy, but I also can't keep sacrificing my own peace of mind for his sake. AITA for telling my brother he can't move into my house after he lost his job and got evicted. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for telling my friend I don't want her to be my child's godmother after she constantly undermines my parenting decisions. I, 30F, recently became a first-time mom to a beautiful baby girl, Emma. I had always imagined being a mother, and now that I am, it's been both overwhelming and rewarding. I have a fantastic support system, but there's one person who I've always been close with, Hannah, 31F, who has been causing me a lot of stress lately. Hannah and I have been friends since high school. We've gone through a lot together, and she's always been someone I've considered a best friend. When Emma was born, I knew I wanted to ask Hannah to be her godmother. We've shared so many memories, and I wanted someone I trusted deeply to help guide and support my daughter as she grew. I always imagined that Hannah would be my first choice for this role. However, things have been getting tense between us lately, and I'm not sure if I made the right decision by asking her to be Emma's godmother. Let me give some context. Since Emma was born, I've made a lot of decisions about how I want to raise her, which is totally normal for a new parent, right? I try to read up on the latest parenting advice, and I've chosen a method that works for my family. I'm more of a gentle parenting advocate, and I've opted for things like baby-led weaning and letting Emma sleep in her crib, which I know is a bit controversial, but it's what works for us. I've also decided to breastfeed as long as I can, and I prefer to avoid a lot of processed food for my child in the early years. The problem with Hannah is that she constantly undermines my choices. It started off with small comments like, "Are you sure you don't want to try formula? It's so much easier. I think you might need a break." Or, "Maybe you should let Emma cry it out for a bit. She'll learn how to self-soothe." I didn't mind at first. Everyone has their opinions on parenting. But as time went on, Hannah started to question pretty much every single decision I made. One example that stands out is when we were having a family dinner and Emma was just starting solids. I made the decision to introduce her to avocado, which I thought was a safe and healthy choice. When I put it in front of her, Hannah immediately started criticizing it, saying that Emma was too young for something like that, and that I should have consulted her pediatrician first. I politely explained that I had already spoken with her doctor and had done some research, but she didn't back off. She continued to make me feel like I was a bad mom for giving her solid food too soon. Another time, Hannah was at my house, and I was feeding Emma. She made a comment about how Emma was still breastfeeding exclusively and that I needed to start weaning her soon because it's just weird for a toddler to still be nursing. I reminded her that Emma was only a few months old, and I planned to breastfeed as long as we both were comfortable with it. But Hannah kept pushing the issue, acting like it was a problem that I hadn't yet decided to wean her. The last straw came a few weeks ago when we were discussing baby sleep schedules. I had been following the advice of a sleep consultant to help Emma with her nighttime sleep, and things have been going pretty smoothly. I share my progress with Hannah, who immediately started telling me that I should just let Emma cry it out. She said it would be better for Emma in the long run, and that I was spoiling her by comforting her every time she cried. This made me feel really upset because I've always been a big believer in responding to my baby's needs. I calmly explained to her that we were following a different sleep method and that it was working for us. But Hannah didn't let it go. She kept saying things like, "You're going to regret being too soft on her when she's older, and you'll see she'll never learn to sleep on her own if you keep picking her up." I tried to explain that every family is different and that what worked for me might not work for someone else, but she wasn't listening. It felt like every conversation we had about parenting turned into an argument about what I should or shouldn't be doing with my child. At this point, I started to feel like my parenting was being invalidated, and that was a hard pill to swallow. I had always looked up to Hannah as a friend, and I respected her opinions, but I realized that her constant criticism was starting to chip away at my confidence as a mother. It didn't feel like she was offering advice. It felt like she was trying to tell me that I was doing everything wrong. I was getting frustrated, and I started pulling back from our friendship a little because I didn't know how to communicate my feelings without making it worse. Finally, I decided that I needed to have a serious conversation with her. I sat Hannah down and told her how much I appreciated her friendship, but that I felt like her constant criticism of my parenting choices was becoming too much. I explained that I knew she had good intentions, but it was affecting me emotionally. I also told her that I was reconsidering asking her to be Emma's godmother because I didn't feel like I could trust her to respect my decisions as a parent. Hannah was taken aback and said that I was being too sensitive. She told me that she just wanted what was best for Emma and that she didn't mean to make me feel bad. But when I tried to explain how her comments were making me feel, she seemed to dismiss it, saying, "I'm just trying to help you out. I've been around kids before, and I know what I'm talking about." She said she was hurt that I was questioning her role as a godmother, but I stuck to my decision. After our conversation, things between us have been tense. We've barely spoken, and when we do, it feels awkward. I'm starting to feel like our friendship is being strained by our different parenting styles. Some of my other friends have said that I might have overreacted and that I should have just let Hannah give her advice and not taken it personally. But I feel like, as a parent, I need to be able to trust the people around me to respect my choices, especially when it comes to raising my daughter. So, AITA for telling my friend that I don't want her to be my child's godmother after she constantly undermines my parenting decisions. I don't want to lose our friendship, but I also need to protect my confidence as a mom. Am I overreacting, or is this a valid boundary to set? AITA for refusing to help my sister financially after she moved to a new city and then complained that I was unsupportive. So, this situation has been weighing on me, and I'm starting to feel like I'm in the wrong, but I don't know. I, 29F, have a younger sister, Sarah, 26F, who has always been a bit impulsive and, to be honest, irresponsible when it comes to big life decisions. I love her, but I've often had to step in and help her out, whether it's with her finances, getting back on her feet after a bad breakup, or even helping her with rent when she doesn't budget properly. While I've always been there for her, I've started to feel like she expects me to bail her out every time she gets herself into a situation. Recently, Sarah decided to move to a new city for a job she got. She had been talking about it for a while, and although I was skeptical, I supported her decision at first. She had made it clear that this job would be her dream position, and she was so excited about starting a new chapter. The city is a few hours away from where we currently live, so it wasn't too far, but it was enough for her to leave behind everything familiar, including her friends and family, to chase this opportunity. A couple of weeks before she left, I asked if she had everything planned out, moving costs, rent, utilities, etc. She assured me that she had it all handled. She was going to be staying in a shared apartment, splitting rent with a roommate, and she had enough money saved up for the first couple of months. I believed her. She's an adult, and I figured she was finally getting her act together. However, about 3 weeks after she moved, I started getting texts from her saying she was struggling. She hadn't gotten her first paycheck yet, and her roommate was not paying their share of the rent on time. Sarah also told me that her car had broken down and she needed to get it fixed ASAP to be able to get to work. To make matters worse, she hadn't budgeted properly, and the savings she had were almost gone. She was asking me for a loan to help cover her car repairs and a portion of her rent until she could get things sorted out. I wasn't sure about this. While I understand that moving to a new place and starting fresh can be challenging, I felt like Sarah wasn't taking her responsibility seriously. She had known about her car issues before moving, and I told her to plan accordingly for it. I also reminded her that I had helped her financially in the past, and I was concerned that she hadn't planned for the reality of moving out on her own. I responded to her request with honesty. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable giving her money because I had already helped her in the past and that I needed to focus on my own finances. I told her that it might be a good idea to ask her parents, who are more financially well off than I am, for help or see if she could borrow money from a friend. I also encouraged her to talk to her roommate about paying rent on time or find other ways to earn some extra cash while she waited for a paycheck. I made it clear that I wanted to help, but I couldn't keep bailing her out every time she got herself in a tight spot. Sarah didn't take it well. She immediately started texting me, accusing me of being unsupportive and too hard on her. She said that I had always been the responsible one and that I was lucky to have my finances in order and that I should be more empathetic toward her struggles. She told me she was really disappointed in me and that I was abandoning her when she needed help the most. She also said that I had no right to judge her because I didn't understand how hard it was for her to be away from home and try to figure everything out on her own. I was upset by her response. Yes, I understood that moving to a new city can be overwhelming, and yes, I knew she was under a lot of stress. But it didn't feel fair to me that she expected me to just swoop in and fix everything whenever she got into a bind. I told her that I understood her situation, but reminded her that she needed to take responsibility for her own decisions and actions. I said that she was an adult, and it was time for her to learn how to handle challenges on her own. Her response was full of anger and frustration. She said that I was being selfish and that I didn't care about her well-being. She claimed that if our roles were reversed, I would expect her to help me. But I couldn't agree with that. I've always been the one to offer help when I could, but I felt like my sister was taking advantage of my kindness. I had done so much for her in the past, and it didn't seem like she was learning from her mistakes. A few days later, Sarah called me, crying. She said she was feeling really overwhelmed and didn't know what to do. She begged me to help her out just this once. Again, I explained that I couldn't do it. I said that I loved her and I wanted her to succeed, but she had to learn how to navigate these challenges without relying on others all the time. This is where things got really tough. She started accusing me of not being there for her the way she needed me to be. She said that I was being too judgmental and cold-hearted when all she needed was some help. She even mentioned that she was struggling with loneliness in the new city and that my refusal to help her was making her feel even more isolated. It was an emotional conversation, but I stood my ground. I told her that my decision wasn't personal. It was about helping her grow and become more responsible. After that, we didn't talk for a week. I felt terrible, but I still believed I'd done the right thing. I'm not financially wealthy, and I've worked hard to get where I am. I can't afford to take on someone else's financial burden, especially when it's a recurring issue. But at the same time, I didn't want to lose my sister over this. I missed her, but I also knew I couldn't just continue enabling her bad financial habits. A few days ago, Sarah reached out to me again. She apologized for how she acted, saying she was just feeling overwhelmed and misunderstood. She acknowledged that she needed to learn how to handle things better. And while she appreciated my support, she realized that I couldn't always be the one to fix everything. I was relieved to hear that she was starting to come to terms with the fact that she needed to take responsibility for herself. But it still feels like there's a rift between us. I feel torn. On one hand, I understand that she's going through a lot and that life can be hard. On the other hand, I've been financially and emotionally drained by her constant need for help. I want to support her, but I also want her to grow up and stop relying on me to bail her out every time she makes a poor decision. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister financially after she moved to a new city and then complained that I was unsupportive? Should I have just given in and helped her out? Or did I do the right thing by standing my ground? AITA for refusing to let my best friend live with me after she lied about her relationship. I, 28F, have a best friend, Lily, 27F, whom I've known since high school. We've been through a lot together, breakups, bad jobs, family issues, you name it. She's the kind of friend who has always been there for me, and I've tried to do the same for her. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs, but nothing that would make me question our friendship. Or at least, that's what I thought. About a year ago, Lily told me that she was having problems with her long-term boyfriend, Mark, 28M. She said that they had been together for almost 5 years, but the relationship was falling apart. According to her, Mark had started being emotionally distant, and she wasn't sure if they could continue. She said they had been fighting a lot, and she needed to take a break from living together to figure things out. I was sympathetic and supportive, of course. I understood what it was like to be in a toxic relationship, and I offered to let her stay with me while she sorted everything out. I live in a spacious one-bedroom apartment in the city, so I figured it wouldn't be a problem. Lily agreed, and she moved in with me a few weeks later. At first, everything seemed fine. We spent a lot of time talking about what was going on in her relationship, and I could see how heartbroken she was. I would listen to her vent about Mark's behavior and how she didn't know where things had gone wrong. There were some nights when she would cry herself to sleep, and I would stay up with her, reassuring her that she was strong and that she'd figure it out. I tried to give her space to heal, but I also tried to make sure she felt supported and loved. Then, after about 2 months of her living with me, things started to feel off. Lily's mood seemed to improve, and she became more distant. She started going out more with friends, coming home late, and spending less time with me. I figured she was just getting back into her social life and trying to find herself after the breakup. But when I asked her how things were going with Mark, she would give me vague responses. She'd say things like, "I'm not sure where we stand," or "I think I'm done, but we're still figuring things out." I didn't push her too hard because I understood that breakups are complicated and sometimes it takes time to process everything. One day, about 4 months after she moved in, I came home early from work and found Lily in the living room, on a video call with none other than Mark. I wasn't angry or upset at first, but it struck me as odd since she had told me so many times that their relationship was over, or at least they were on a break. I didn't want to intrude on their conversation, so I quietly went to my room to give them privacy. But as I passed by, I overheard parts of the conversation. It wasn't just casual small talk. Lily was laughing and being affectionate with him. They were clearly still together. The next few days, I didn't bring it up. I was trying to process what I had overheard. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something didn't feel right. Eventually, I decided to confront her. I asked her directly about the call, and she hesitated for a moment before brushing it off. She said that she and Mark were working things out, but that she didn't want to tell me right away because she was still unsure about where things were going. I could tell she wasn't being completely honest, but I didn't press her further. Then, a few weeks later, Lily started receiving flowers and texts from Mark at all hours of the day. She would giggle whenever she checked her phone, and I noticed she was getting excited whenever he called or texted. One day, when she was out of the apartment, I took the opportunity to go through the messages on her phone. I know it was wrong, but I was feeling increasingly frustrated and confused. What I found was shocking. Lily and Mark weren't just working things out. They were secretly dating, and they had been for months. They had gone on trips together, and she had lied to me about every single part of their relationship. She had even gone so far as to tell me that they had broken up when they hadn't. I confronted her that night. I told her I knew about the secret relationship, and I asked her why she had lied to me for so long. At first, she was defensive, saying that she didn't want to hurt me by telling me the truth. She said that she had been embarrassed because she wasn't sure how I would react to her getting back together with Mark after everything that had happened. She claimed she didn't want to risk ruining our friendship by admitting that she had been lying, and that she just wanted things to be normal between us. But the more she talked, the angrier I became. I couldn't believe that she had kept such a huge secret from me. I had offered her a place to stay, listened to her vent about her heartbreak, and given her a place to heal, only for her to be secretly seeing the same person she claimed had hurt her. I told her that I felt completely betrayed. I was furious that she had used me as a sounding board and as a place to hide while she was still actively in a relationship with Mark. It wasn't just the lying, it was the fact that she had manipulated me, made me believe that she was heartbroken and needed space, all while she was playing happy families behind my back. Lily apologized profusely, saying that she never meant to hurt me, but I felt like the damage had already been done. She asked if she could stay a little longer while she figured things out, but I told her no. I said that I couldn't have her living with me anymore after everything that had happened. I told her that if she couldn't be honest with me, then I didn't feel comfortable continuing to let her stay in my home. She left the next day, and we haven't spoken much since. A few mutual friends have reached out, trying to get us to make up, but I just can't get past the feeling of being lied to and used. I feel like I supported her through something that wasn't even real, and I've been struggling to understand why she thought it was okay to lie to me like that. Now, I'm starting to wonder if I was too harsh. I've always been the type to be there for my friends, no matter what, and maybe I should have been more understanding of her situation. But at the same time, I feel like she completely violated my trust, and I can't just overlook that. AITA for refusing to let my best friend live with me after she lied about her relationship. AITA for refusing to help my best friend financially after she keeps getting into debt. I, 27F, have a best friend, Julia, 28F, who I've known since high school. We've always been close, and I've always considered her family. Over the years, I've supported her in many ways, emotionally, financially, and even logistically. I've always been there for her through her tough times, and I thought we had a solid, mutual friendship. A couple of years ago, Julia started getting into debt. She had a steady job at the time, but she kept spending beyond her means. She would buy expensive clothes, go out to eat all the time, and take trips even though she wasn't financially stable. She would constantly ask me for advice about budgeting and money, and I'd always try to help her out with suggestions, but she wouldn't really listen. Instead, she would continue with her habits of overspending, using credit cards to cover it all. At first, I didn't mind so much. I understand that managing money can be hard, especially when you're younger. I offered to help her with a few small bills when she'd ask, and I always tried to be there when she needed a listening ear. But over time, I started noticing a pattern. Every time she got into debt, she'd turn to me for help. She would beg me for loans, promising that she'd pay me back soon. And because we were such close friends, I would lend her money, thinking it was just temporary and that she'd figure out. The first couple of times, I didn't think much of it. I lent her money for her rent when she was behind, or for car repairs when she couldn't afford them. She always reassured me she'd pay me back as soon as her next paycheck came in. But the thing is, the paybacks never happen on time. And when I'd remind her, she'd make excuses. She didn't get as much overtime as she thought, or she had to pay off other bills first, or her bank account had an unexpected charge. Every time, I'd accept the excuse, but it started to feel like I was never going to see that money again. Fast forward a few months, and I noticed that her financial situation wasn't improving. If anything, it was getting worse. She would still be making impulsive purchases, things like designer bags, weekend getaways, and pricey meals, while I was barely scraping by. I started to get frustrated, but I didn't want to be the bad friend. So I kept helping her. Eventually, I lent her a larger amount to help cover some medical bills she couldn't pay, but after that, I had to stop and take a hard look at the situation. I realized that she was using me as a crutch. Every time she got into a financial mess, she came to me for help, but she never took any real steps to fix her habits. I would tell her to cut back on unnecessary spending or to start a budget, but she'd brush it off and continue doing whatever she wanted. Meanwhile, I was struggling to make ends meet, and I kept telling myself that I couldn't keep doing this. Helping her financially was draining me emotionally and financially. A few weeks ago, things came to a head. Julia called me in a panic, saying that she had just received a notice from her landlord that she was being evicted because she hadn't been able to pay her rent for the last 2 months. She told me she needed $1,500 by the end of the week or she'd be out on the streets. She begged me for the money, promising again that she'd pay me back as soon as she could. At this point, I had already loaned her thousands of dollars over the last couple of years, and I knew she was unlikely to pay me back anytime soon. I told her I couldn't do it anymore. I explained that I'd been helping her for a long time, but it was affecting me both financially and emotionally. I told her that I wasn't in a position to keep bailing her out and that I needed her to take responsibility for her own finances. I told her that I would still be there to support her in other ways, like helping her find a new place to live or offering emotional support, but I couldn't keep giving her money. She was devastated. Julia started crying on the phone and said that I was the only person she could rely on, and now I was abandoning her. She accused me of not caring about her and said that if I were truly her friend, I'd help her through this difficult time. She said that I had never been supportive before when she really needed me, and that I was making her feel like I didn't care about our friendship. I felt guilty, but I also knew that I couldn't keep enabling her. I had been watching her spiral for years, and I had to set a boundary. I reminded her that I had already helped her so much, and that part of being a friend isn't just handing out money. It's encouraging each other to grow and make better choices. She didn't take it well, and we ended up having a heated argument. She called me selfish and told me I was just like everyone else in her life who had let her down. Since then, she hasn't spoken to me. I reached out a few times to see how she was doing, but she hasn't responded. It's been almost a month now, and I'm starting to feel the weight of the situation. On one hand, I feel like I did the right thing. I've been patient and supportive for years, and I can't keep sacrificing my own financial security to prop her up. On the other hand, I miss our friendship, and I feel like I may have pushed her away for good. My other friends have mixed opinions. Some say that I was right to stop helping her and that I need to take care of myself, but others think I'm being too harsh and that I should have found a way to help her out one last time. They've told me that as her best friend, I should have been there for her no matter what. AITA for refusing to help my best friend financially after she keeps getting into debt. AITA for refusing to give my brother my car after he crashed his. I, 28F, have a brother, Ethan, 25M, who I've always had a rocky relationship with. Growing up, he was a troublemaker, always getting into trouble at school, sneaking out, and being generally rebellious. He was the favorite in our family because of how charming and charismatic he could be, but it was always clear to me that he was the one who got away with the most. I was the responsible one, doing everything right, while he did whatever he wanted and faced little to no consequences. This dynamic led to some tension over the years, and though we've gotten better at tolerating each other as adults, our relationship is still strained. A few months ago, Ethan got his first car, a used sedan that he'd saved up for by working part-time. I was happy for him because it felt like he was starting to get his life together. He was really proud of it and loved showing it off to the family. But not long after, things started going downhill. Ethan didn't have the best driving habits. He was always speeding, taking risks, and being reckless, but I chalked it up to the fact that he was still new to driving and had a lot to learn. I tried to give him some advice here and there, but he'd shrug it off, acting like I was nagging him. Fast forward a couple of weeks ago, and Ethan called me in a panic. He told me that he'd gotten into a car accident. He was shaken up, but said he was okay, so I was relieved to hear that he wasn't seriously hurt. However, the car was a different story. According to him, he'd swerved to avoid a deer that ran into the road and ended up hitting a tree. The car was totaled, completely unusable. I was upset, but tried to stay calm while talking to him. I asked if he was okay, and he assured me he was. But the fact that he'd gotten into the accident due to his reckless driving habits didn't sit well with me. I tried to explain that accidents like this happen when you don't drive responsibly, and I could tell he was a bit defensive. But at the end of the conversation, I figured he would handle it, get his insurance involved, and figure out how to get back on his feet. The next day, Ethan came over to my apartment, looking like a wreck. He told me that the insurance company wouldn't cover the full cost of replacing the car, and he was short on money to buy a new one. He was asking if I could lend him my car to use for a few weeks until he could get a replacement. I was hesitant. I've had my car for a few years now, and it's been my pride and joy. I worked hard to afford it, and it's the only reliable thing I have when it comes to getting to work and other commitments. I knew he was in a tough spot, but I didn't feel comfortable handing over my car to him, especially after hearing how he crashed his own. He didn't even seem all that concerned about his reckless driving. Instead, he just wanted a quick solution. I told him I wasn't sure if that was a good idea. I explained that I needed my car and that I wasn't comfortable letting him borrow it, especially considering how easily he could damage it like he did with his own. Ethan didn't take that well. He immediately started to guilt trip me, saying things like, "You're really just going to let me struggle? I'm your brother. I don't have anyone else to turn to." He even said that if I cared about him, I'd let him borrow my car, since it would help him get to work and handle his responsibilities. I understand he was stressed, but it felt like he was manipulating me into feeling bad for not immediately saying yes. I told him that I would help him in other ways, like helping him research used cars or finding affordable rental options, but I couldn't just hand over my car. He got angry, saying I was selfish and that I never helped him when he needed it, even though I was the one who was always responsible. He said I had the means to help him and that it was unfair of me to withhold my car. The argument escalated quickly. Ethan started throwing accusations at me, saying that I only cared about my precious car and not about him as a person. He called me a selfish and accused me of thinking I was better than him. He kept bringing up how I'd always been the perfect one in the family while he had to deal with everything on his own. I tried to explain that this wasn't about him being perfect or not. I just didn't feel comfortable lending him my car after the way he had handled his own. After a long back and forth, I told him that I was sorry he was in a tough spot, but I couldn't just give him my car. I felt like it wasn't a matter of him needing help. It was a matter of him needing to take responsibility for his actions. If he hadn't been so reckless with his driving, he wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. He stormed out of my apartment, and we haven't spoken since. Our parents called me a few days later, saying I should have just helped him. They said that I was being too harsh and that I could have just let him use the car for a little while. They argued that I had the resources to help him, and that family is supposed to be there for each other during tough times. I feel conflicted, though. On the one hand, I know I could have just given him the car and avoided the drama, but I also don't think that would have been the right decision. Ethan has a pattern of being irresponsible and expecting others to bail him out when things go wrong. I've always been the one who picks up the slack, and this time, I just didn't think it was my responsibility to save him from his own mistakes. Now, I'm wondering if I was too harsh. Should I have just let him borrow the car for a little while, knowing how much he needed it? Or did I make the right decision by standing my ground and not enabling his reckless behavior? AITA for refusing to give my brother my car after he crashed his? AITA for refusing to let my friend use my car after she crashed hers and expects me to lend mine for weeks? I-27F have a friend, Sarah, 28F, who I've known for about 5 years. We met through mutual friends in college and hit it off immediately. We have a lot in common, and I've always enjoyed having her around. Over the years, we've been there for each other through a lot, and I would say we're close, though not without our issues. Now, I'm the type of person who tends to help others when they need it, and I've always prided myself on being a reliable friend. I've given Sarah rides when she didn't have a car, helped her move twice, and even bailed her out financially when she was going through a tough time. I've never asked for anything in return, but I've always appreciated her company and our friendship. However, things recently took a turn when Sarah got into a car accident. About 3 weeks ago, Sarah called me in a panic, saying she had crashed her car. She wasn't seriously injured, thank God, but her car was totaled. She said the accident was her fault and that she had no idea what to do because she didn't have the money for repairs and her insurance wouldn't cover the full cost of replacing the car. It was a stressful situation for her, and I felt bad because I knew how much she relied on her car to get to work, school, and other places. I tried to be supportive and offered to help her figure out a solution. We talked about the insurance details, and I even helped her search for more affordable replacement cars. However, as the days went by, Sarah started to seem more and more desperate. It was clear she wasn't really looking for a long-term solution, but instead kept leaning on me for short-term fixes. She'd call me asking if I could drive her to this appointment or that meeting, or if I could pick up groceries for her because she had no car. I didn't mind helping out at first, but it started to feel like I was being taken for granted. She never really seemed to be making any progress on getting a new car, and every time I tried to talk about her getting a rental or arranging a ride-sharing service, she'd brush it off and keep coming up with excuses. She was clearly not taking the situation as seriously as she should, and I began to feel frustrated. Then, last week, Sarah asked if she could borrow my car. I was shocked. She said that her insurance was taking too long to process, and she needed to get to work and some other appointments. She explained that her car wouldn't be ready for weeks, and she couldn't afford a rental, so she was hoping I would lend her my car in the meantime. At first, I thought she was joking, but when I realized she was serious, I told her I couldn't do that. I explained that I needed my car for work and personal reasons, and that I wasn't comfortable letting her borrow it for weeks, especially considering how careless she had been with her own car. She was upset. She told me I was being unreasonable and selfish. She said that I had a perfectly good car and that it would be such an easy favor to do for a friend. She even tried guilt-tripping me by saying, if our roles were reversed, I would let you borrow my car without a second thought. I pointed out that she wasn't in a situation where she needed to borrow my car for an extended period. She had plenty of other options, like public transportation or ride-sharing services, and I didn't feel comfortable handing over my car, especially since she had just wrecked hers. Despite me trying to explain my reasons, she kept pushing. She said I should trust her, and it wasn't like she would crash my car too. She said I was overreacting and that I was being a bad friend by not helping her out when she needed it. She even brought up all the times I had helped her in the past and said that I owed her. She said that my refusal to lend her my car was proof that I didn't really care about our friendship. This really upset me. I've been a supportive friend to her for years, and now she was acting like I was doing something terrible just because I didn't want to lend her my car. It felt like she was taking my kindness for granted, and it made me question if I had been too generous with her in the past. I reminded her that I had always helped her when she needed it, but this was different. Lending her my car wasn't a small favor. It was a huge ask, and I wasn't comfortable with it. The conversation ended with Sarah saying she was disappointed in me, and she hasn't really spoken to me since. A few of our mutual friends had tried to reach out and get us to talk, but I still feel like I'm in the right. I get that she's going through a tough time, but I don't think it's fair for her to demand something so unreasonable just because we're friends. I feel like she's taking advantage of my willingness to help, and I'm not sure if I'm being too harsh or if she's being entitled. Since then, I've been questioning whether I made the right call. I understand that she's in a tough spot, but I also don't think that means I should just give in to every request she has. Should I have been more understanding and lent her my car for a few weeks? Or did I do the right thing by sticking to my boundaries and refusing her request? AITA for refusing to let my friend use my car after she crashed hers and expects me to lend mine for weeks? AITA for refusing to let my brother stay with me after he started a business and lost all his money? I, 32F, have a brother, Jason, 29M, who has always been a bit of a dreamer. Growing up, he had all sorts of big ideas. He wanted to be a professional gamer, a YouTube influencer, a musician, you name it. Our parents always supported his dreams, even when they seemed unrealistic, but they were constantly warning him to be realistic and have a backup plan. I, on the other hand, was always more grounded. I went to college, got a stable job, and have worked hard to build my career. Jason didn't finish college. After a couple of years, he dropped out to pursue his entrepreneurial journey, which in his words meant starting an online business. He was never specific about what the business actually did, but it was clear he was spending a lot of money on things like advertising, branding, and hiring people to help him. He told everyone that his business was on the brink of taking off, and for a while, it seemed like he was making progress. But then, about a year ago, things started to go south. He stopped talking about his business as much, and when he did, it was always about how challenging it was, but he kept insisting that he just needed a little more time. A few months ago, he finally admitted that he had lost all of his money. He had borrowed from friends and family, taken out loans, and maxed out his credit cards in an attempt to keep his business afloat. But it wasn't enough. He had no savings left and was essentially broke. He moved out of his apartment because he couldn't afford rent anymore, and that's when he asked if he could stay with me. At first, I was hesitant, but I felt bad. He's my brother, and I knew he had been struggling. I also felt guilty because, while I had been building my career, he had been chasing something that didn't work out. So, I agreed to let him stay with me for a little while, with the understanding that he'd be looking for a job and trying to get back on his feet. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment in the city, and it's not ideal for two people, but I made it work. I set some ground rules when he moved in. He had to contribute to rent and utilities. He needed to help out around the house, and he couldn't just sit around all day playing video games or lounging. I made it clear that I expected him to take the situation seriously and not treat it like a permanent arrangement. He agreed and promised to get a job as soon as possible. The first couple of weeks went okay. Jason seemed motivated and was applying to jobs. He even got a few interviews. But as the weeks turned into months, things started to take a turn. Jason didn't seem to be taking the job search seriously. He'd spend entire days on his phone, watching TV, or playing video games. I'd ask him how the job applications were going, and he'd tell me that he was still waiting to hear back, or they said they'd get back to him soon. I could tell he was being evasive, and I began to get frustrated. I tried to encourage him, offering to help him with his resume and job applications. I even suggested looking into temp work or freelance gigs to tide him over, but he wasn't interested. He would say things like, "I don't want to settle for something that's not related to what I really want to do, or I don't want to work in retail or customer service. That's not for me." Meanwhile, he was spending more and more time at home, and I was the one paying for everything. At this point, I started to get really frustrated. I'm not a rich person by any means, and while I had offered to help him out temporarily, I wasn't in a position to be financially responsible for him indefinitely. I had bills to pay, a rent increase to deal with, and a life of my own to manage. I wasn't asking him to pay all of the rent, but I had expected him to at least contribute something toward groceries and utilities. Instead, he would occasionally offer to buy a pizza or get takeout as a way to contribute, but it never felt like he was really pulling his weight. A month into his stay, I told him that it was time for him to start paying his share of rent, even if it was a smaller amount than what I was paying. He got upset, saying that he didn't have enough money from his savings to cover rent and that he was still figuring things out. I told him that he needed to contribute in some way if he was going to stay here. It felt like I was doing everything, covering rent, utilities, and groceries, and he was just occupying space without offering anything in return. The final straw came about 2 months ago when I came home from work to find him lounging on the couch, playing video games. I had been stressed about work and other personal things, and I was feeling overwhelmed. I asked him if he had done anything productive that day. He told me he was taking a break and figuring things out. When I asked about his job search, he told me he hadn't applied to any new positions because he didn't feel ready yet and that he was waiting for the right opportunity. I snapped. I told him that it was time for him to go. I couldn't keep enabling his lack of responsibility and laziness. I told him that he had to either start pulling his weight financially or find another place to stay. I reminded him that this wasn't a permanent solution and that I had already gone above and beyond to help him. He got angry and said that I was being too harsh and that he was still figuring things out. He accused me of being unsympathetic and not understanding how hard it was for him to get back on his feet. He left a few days later, but we haven't spoken much since. He's staying with a friend now, but I still feel guilty. I know he's struggling, but at the same time, I don't think I'm wrong for expecting him to take responsibility and not treat my home like a free ride. I'm starting to feel like I've been too generous with my help, and that it was time for him to grow up and handle things on his own. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother stay with me after he lost all his money and didn't seem to be making any progress toward getting his life back on track? Should I have been more patient, or did I do the right thing by setting boundaries and asking him to leave? AITA for not letting my friend bring her dog to my house after she promised she wouldn't? I, 29F, have a close friend, Jess, 30F, whom I've known since college. Over the years, we've been through a lot together and always had each other's backs. Jess is one of the most caring people I know, and we're super close, so I really value our friendship. Recently, Jess and I plan to hang out at my place for a weekend. We don't see each other that often due to work and life, but we make an effort to stay in touch. When we made these plans, I specifically mentioned that I'd love for her to come over, but there was one condition. I don't want her bringing her dog, Max, along. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, I should clarify that it's not because I don't like dogs or don't like Jess's dog. I actually adore Max. He's a sweet, well-behaved dog, and I love having him around when I visit Jess or when we hang out in pet-friendly places. The issue lies with my living situation. I live in a small apartment that has very strict rules about pets. My building has a no pets allowed policy, which is one of the main reasons why I don't have a dog of my own. While I'm allowed to have guests and can have pets over occasionally, I need to be careful not to break the rules too often, especially since the building manager is super strict and keeps a close eye on the tenants. I don't want to risk facing any issues with the lease or possibly getting kicked out over a dog being there. I talked to Jess about my living situation when we were making plans, and I explained why I couldn't have Max at my place. Jess was understanding at first, saying that it wasn't a big deal and she could always leave Max at home. She promised she wouldn't bring him, and we agreed that she'd come over without him for the weekend. The weekend arrived, and I was really looking forward to spending some quality time with Jess. However, when she arrived at my apartment, she showed up with Max. I was immediately taken aback. I hadn't expected her to go back on her word, and I was pretty upset. I asked her why she brought Max after she had promised she wouldn't, and she gave me this whole spiel about how she couldn't bear leaving him at home alone for the weekend. She said she had tried everything, but she couldn't find anyone to watch him, and he was used to being around her. Now I get it. I know how much she loves Max, and I understand that it's hard to leave your pet behind when you're going away for a while. However, I had already made it clear how important it was that I didn't break the building rules. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. I had made it clear what the situation was, and she promised she wouldn't bring him. I told Jess I was really uncomfortable with the situation. I explained that I couldn't risk violating the building's rules, and that having Max over could lead to serious consequences for me. She seemed to brush it off and said, "Well, he's already here, and it'll be fine. We can just keep him in the room, and I'll take him out for walks. It won't be a big deal." But to me, it wasn't about whether it would be a big deal or not. It was about respecting my boundaries and the commitment she made. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with Max being there, and that she would have to either take him home or find another solution. She got defensive and said, "It's just a dog. Why are you being so dramatic? I thought we were friends, and you can't even make an exception for me once in a while?" I felt really hurt by her response. It felt like she was dismissing my concerns and valuing her convenience over my needs. I told her I couldn't have Max in my apartment, and that I wasn't willing to break the rules for her, no matter how much I cared about her or the dog. I also said that if she couldn't find a solution and was unwilling to leave Max at home, we'd have to reschedule our plans. Jess got upset and argued with me for a bit. She said that I was being unreasonable and that she didn't understand why I was making such a big deal over something so small. She also said that I should trust her to handle the situation and that I was overreacting. She ended up leaving my apartment early, saying she was going to take Max back to her place. I felt guilty afterward, but also really frustrated. I've always been a person who respects others' boundaries, and I felt like Jess wasn't doing the same for me. I tried to reach out to her to explain again that it wasn't about Max or even about the weekend itself. It was about trust and respecting promises. But she hasn't really responded to my messages in a way that feels like she understands where I'm coming from. Some of our mutual friends have weighed in on the situation. A couple of them think that I overreacted and that I should have let it slide since it was just a dog, but others agree that Jess was wrong to go back on her word. So now, I'm left wondering if I'm being unreasonable. Maybe I should have made an exception for Jess since she was so upset, but I also don't want to let people take advantage of me or disregard my boundaries. Am I the asshole for not letting my friend bring her dog to my house after she promised she wouldn't? I'm really conflicted. I love Jess and want to maintain a good friendship, but I also feel like I set a clear boundary that should have been respected. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.